Well, we'll be good. Okay, we're going to open up this public forum. The topic is St. Helens Hazard Mitigation Plan. And I do believe I will turn it over to John Walsh. Yes.
Quickly turn it over to Sean Brown with the county and,
Okay.
and our building official that have been working on the update of this hazard mitigation plan. So
All right.
if you guys want to come up and
Tag team this. Remember, you got to speak loudly into that mic. Yep. State your names for the record, please, just because we're on.
And you gotta be close to the mic, or we can't hear you.
Mike DeRoyo, building official, City of St. Helens.
Yep.
Sean Brown, Columbia County Emergency Management Deputy Director.
Okay. All right. So,
Gary.
you guys have some information for us?
To start.
Yes, please.
Okay, so
Go ahead and grab the mic and bring it over to you. So you're just there. You go.
so as you may know, FEMA and emergency management is all about plans. Pretty
Yep.
much everything we do is with plans, and the most important plans that we actually have and use is a hazard mitigation plan. And the reason for that is because that equals dollars.
Mhm.
So if something happens to our area, to the city of St. Helens, what we need is that mitigation plan in order for FEMA to build back better. If we don't have that plan, they'll build back, but not better. So if they'll build back just the way it was, but the next time it floods, then we'll have the same exact issues. But if we have it in our plan that, yes, this is already a problem, yes, we would actually like to get it fixed before the next flood, and when they see it in our plan when we go to get dollars, then they'll actually give us more money to actually fix the problem. And that's the biggest part of that plan. And that plan pretty much includes, well, what we need from you guys is the tax assessed value of the properties for St. Helens, and also what exactly hazards that you guys are worried about, such as flooding, earthquakes, whatever the case may be, whatever particular hazards that really concern you, and also what you could possibly see as a project in the future to help your mitigation. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
Okay. Any questions at this point?
No. Got to have it in the plan in order for it to be covered for dollars in the future.
Exactly.
Yep.
So our update process started with a team, the steering committee, and that consisted of Sue, Dave, myself, and John. We're all part of that team, and we met to just review the existing document and update it as we saw necessary. And like Sean had said, it basically declares the values and the targeted areas that we see, such as infrastructure, residential structures, that we see as being at risk, and then what risks they face. And so that's all placed in here and updated. One example of an update, we added airborne illnesses and epidemics of that nature to the list of things that the city faces, and went through and just updated some of the other information throughout the document. Pretty simple stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty important for emergency management that all the cities, such as St. Helens, do their part so that we can get this all in and then sent out to FEMA. So it's important to emergency management in the county that we can get this accomplished. So we appreciate you guys working hard on it.
I see one hole, or maybe it's, again, this is all rules. There's nothing really on what happens if the railroad goes.
That's something we're actually working on, and that's something that you can actually even state in your plan as a concern. But we're looking at doing more studies on it, and as far as what products actually transfer from here to going west, and also we're actually looking to put an exercise on what happens if the train actually derails. So we're working on that. It's a huge concern of ours also, and that's something we are planning for. It can be your plan, but doesn't have to, because, yeah, but
I was
It
just
is something we're
wondering
looking
whether-
at.
Since the transportation,
Mhm.
interstate transportation covers so much, whether you even had to worry about that. That was a real question.
Correct, and we do actually have a separate plan for that, for the hazmat rail plan for issues like that, but it doesn't necessarily have to go on that one.
Okay, that was the question.
We have another plan specifically that addresses that.
Does that include storage of hazardous materials on city property as well?
Our plan does not include the storage. But there is the hazmat teams for fire that would attack that. That would come from Portland and Astoria. They have a hazmat team in each of those cities.
I'm thinking in particular the switching yard by Highway 30, close to the school.
Mm-hmm.
That those 4 or 5 tracks that I sometimes see storage of hazardous material because it stays in
Is it,
place.
sitting
It
on the
is
rail
not-
still
It
there?
is not transporting through the city.
Okay.
It's staying in place.
Well, if it's still on rail, there's still an issue, then the hazmat rail would actually still work for that, even though it's not actually moving. If it's on rails, our plans would still be able to cover something like that. But completely separation as far as the topic goes versus the mitigation plan.
Okay, other questions?
There is a list of the things that there is a list in here of the things that are identified as hazards that we face in the document. And those were not mentioned in this, and I'll kind of look into it. If we want to add it to it, we can do that before this is adopted, if there are things, and that's what this is all about, so.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
One of the new disaster chemistries that are starting to wander around is some of the funny batteries in these electric cars. Is that come under this, or is that again under transportation?
I don't know that there's. I know they have a hard time getting rid of those batteries, but I don't know that they're actually danger in the vehicles themselves. At least I have not heard of that.
Well, I'm talking about an accident. Lithium batteries do bad things.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it yet. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I haven't heard it being an issue yet. And we haven't addressed that I'm aware of at this point. But it's a good topic to think about. And
Well, you've
and
heard
discuss
laptops
about.
and things like that, and a lot of medical equipment with lithium batteries you can't ship easily through the airlines. I mean,
Right.
So, and a lot of the car batteries are lithium. A lot of them are not. That was
right.
What's-
Lieutenant, have you ever seen a car accident with problems with the battery-powered vehicles? Yeah, I haven't heard of that either.
Have you had any accidents with electric vehicles? Well, so much for that thought.
Well, I'm sure there has been somewhere, but obviously, but I haven't heard of it yet.
What's extremely, extremely dangerous and it never goes away are the transformers. And the transformers up on the utility poles.
Mm-hmm.
So those need to be mitigated somehow, some way, when they're transported and where they go, well, what's happening with those, and what they are replaced with. Apparently, there are new transformers now that aren't as volatile as the older ones, or the ones that are in many that are in place now.
Mm-hmm.
They're around forever.
Right.
They're just like nuclear waste.
Right.
There's no way to get rid of them, and they're very hazardous in our community.
Yeah, I don't know what the PUD does with them after they replace them or take them down.
It'd be
at this point.
interesting to find out what, along the lines while we're doing that, just to get as much information as we possibly can, so there's no surprises down the line.
That's true. Something else for us to look into. Good point.
Okay, do we open it up for public comment? Well, I guess, maybe, maybe we're not seeing something, people would like to come up?
Public forum.
Yep. Okay, so if there's anybody here to speak on behalf of the St. Helens Hazardous Mitigation Plan, we have our county and our building official here to answer questions. They've already went through with a team and identified the areas in St. Helens and updated our plan. And the reason, and if you're just joining us, the reason it is important is not just to identify those areas, but also to have the FEMA money available when in occurrence of an accident or one of those, a flood or something like that happens, the money's available. So that's what this meeting's about.
So it might be good to talk about the adoption process. If it's, is there, it escapes me, we do this every 5 years. I think it's a resolution. Sean, if you want to come back out and talk about that.
This is my first time going through this also.
Mine too, it's so bad.
The person's actually writing this. He told me, but I can't remember exactly the flow of it at this point, so I don't remember. It's something I'll have to get back to you by.
As far as milestones is adopted by,
So I think what we do is we'll actually send it to FEMA before it gets officially adopted by everybody. Because if we have to make changes and do all that and then send back to FEMA again, we don't actually have, so it doesn't have to be adopted like 3 or 4 or 5 times. So it won't be officially become adopted until we actually, FEMA blesses off on it, and then we bring it back and then we go get more signatures at that point. So your adoption process at this point doesn't have to happen right now, not until we get the okay from FEMA.
that's
So
it.
that way we don't bring it back to you again and again and again after we make more changes.
So it could potentially be
Lot
3
around-
to 4 months out.
It sure could, like
Yeah.
fall or so.
Yes.
But it's multi-jurisdictional, all the counties of the cities in the county are
Yes,
participating. in-
we'll have to get all the signatures after that point, and that's a big process too, because
I
I
imagine
think
it is.
everybody like yourselves each time to get it all signed.
So are we the first city that you've been to?
No, you're not the first city. You're actually the first commission though that I've been to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, in that respect, yes, you are.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Question, so was the railroad listed as a hazard?
And this is actually for natural hazards. It's a natural hazard mitigation plan, which the railroad isn't considered natural hazard at that point.
And he stated that would be a fire marshal.
Yes, they actually have that plan, and they're holding that plan for the railroad hazardous materials plan.
Yep.
They actually carry that one.
They probably also have, all the industrial stuff, because you're talking, like, when you started, you said we're talking flood, earthquake.
Airborne, yes, viruses.
Stuff that happens.
Natural.
There's no fault of man.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep.
Which, I mean, the earthquake could cause all those issues, and that's where,
You just have to link it
yes,
together. Yeah.
exactly.
So I recall a really healthy 5 years ago during the update, that's a similar conversation related to the rail, and it was actually as part of the larger mitigation or hazard mitigation plan. There was a lot of conversation about rail.
And I believe that rail plan was made after that mitigation plan, so it was addressed afterwards. And this was actually the first place in the state that came with the hazmat rail plan that they did. They did a good job on that. And since then, other jurisdictions have actually copied that plan.
Where you are sitting amongst a community that has a tremendous concern about rail safety, and that's why this is going that direction.
That's completely
And I would
okay.
imagine if community input was more vital at this time, then we'd have a room full of people, and we'd be here all night.
Well,
We've been here all night before dealing with concerns about rail safety.
Yeah, we have a lot of the same issues, like when they had the rail derailment, I don't know, about a year and a half ago or so over east of here. And it's really similar because it was like right along the river. The rail travels right along the river because rail has a hard time with going the heights and up and down. So a lot of the rail, especially back in the day, just followed along the river. But they didn't think of, okay, what happens if the rail actually goes into the river? What the issues that would cause? But that's why so many rails are on the river now, is because back in the day that was the easiest way to do it. And so, yeah, we are definitely addressing that issue and how it's a problem. and we're tackling it and having be ready as much as we can for it.
Is there anything anybody can do about parking the train cars in the city?
This forum, again, like he said, it's about natural hazards mitigation plan. It's flooding. Michael, you seem like you're on the edge of your seat. Sure. Maybe Michael might have a different answer than I was getting ready to give.
Well, and not so much a specific answer to that. Just to go down the list, actually, of things that were identified.
Sure.
Clear a few
Let-
things.
yeah,
real
let's
quick.
do that.
So we have flood, winter storm, and this is applicable to all the structures that we have identified, like I said, which are infrastructure, government facilities, public facilities, residential, I think I already said that, sorry, residential structures, and commercial structures throughout the city. So we state the hazard and what's actually going to be affected by that in terms of values. So we have flood, winter storm, landslide, fire, earthquake, volcano, wind, erosion. Now, that's under natural hazards. Under technological hazards, we have dam failure, disruption of utility and transportation systems, hazardous materials are identified, and that would cover train, that would cover a truck, but it would have to, if it required FEMA dollars, this would
It
come
had to
in
be a
in
big,
addition.
big scale, yeah.
And terrorism, and the one that got added to the list this year was infectious disease epidemic.
Oh, wow.
So.
I have a question or a concern about fire as well. We've a portion of our city has been identified as a catastrophic fire zone in the state. Is there any concern about and that specifically is the Dalton Lake area and up into the Gray Cliffs area? Has there been any kind of concern regarding that issue? Because in the summer months, the north wind comes up to 10 to 15 to 20 knots almost every afternoon. And we've also been told that the fire department will not go down there into that area because they can't get out and they would get trapped. Well, people live there, and somehow there's got to be a plan. I would think some kind of plan, some kind of evacuation. Does this fit into your scope of work?
The risk is identified in this document, and the structures that are affected, and I don't know off the top of my head whether or not those specific districts that you were describing are identified, but it's by number. We've identified that so many structures are susceptible to these hazards, but it doesn't specifically lay out like a plan of attack or any kind of what we would do to mitigate that at this point. It's just identifying the hazards again about funding.
And the structures, what's close is the Elks Club, and that should raise a few eyebrows in the community. And the new school that's going in, it's very close, and it's on the fringe of all that, a hazardous fire zone.
The only problem with that is, I mean, there's nothing, if you're gonna have people moving out into those areas, that's always, if you're gonna have people moving into the areas where all the trees are, it's the chance that they take, honestly, and there's no way to, and if you're out in the middle of, all surrounded by trees, and maybe there's no hydrant by your house, again, there's different things you can mitigate to your house in particularly make your house like a Firewise house ready for, cutting so many trees down and certain kind of plants and stuff don't catch on fire. So people can take upon themselves to do something like that. But other than that, if they're going to go live in the trees, it is going to be a hazard. It's just, that's how it is when they're taking their chance when they want to live that way. But again, they can do some stuff also to mitigate it for themselves.
Yeah, and hats off to past fire district marshals for coming around and implementing some grants that each property owner could do that by cleaning up their property. It was they would reimburse up to a couple $100 or whatever for brush cutting and that kind of thing. And that's one thing. Ordinances could be another, and that's where the city fits in.
Right.
You know,
And a lot of times there's ordinances, but if they're not followed,
right?
which happens a lot too.
Exactly.
And even if it's not you, it's your neighbor. If your neighbor screws up, though, it can obviously affect you.
One of the things now is this is more of a question of FEMA's ruling. Most of this country, the trees aren't as big as they are around here and don't burn like they do here. I mean, you can have a 50-foot clearance around your house with a 200-foot tree. Doesn't cut it very well. Is there any specific things for FEMA taking care of the West Coast here where we have real trees? Or is it a blanket thing?
I honestly can't answer that question. I haven't had to deal with it yet, and yeah, I don't know how they would attack that if we had a wildfire issue. But I do know is when they were talking about when our guys went down to California, was Paradise, and then there was the other town. Well, Paradise was not a fire-wise community; it burned all up. The other town that wasn't even hardly touched, and it didn't have any issues whatsoever. So it can make a huge difference on being a fire-wise community.
I agree with you. If there are ordinances that deal with keeping brush and shrubbery and that kind of thing away from structures and cutting limbs below eave level, so at least they're up above the house rather than on it. And there's a cliff area as well, as that's going, that whole cliff area, the Great Cliffs area, will react very much like a chimney. Very much what we saw like the Notre Dame. Fire goes up, steeple goes down, and so there's houses up on top of that cliff. And so it's very catastrophic down there if there ever gets to be a fire.
Right.
So anything that's listed that could help the city with ordinances or anything would be much to our advantage.
Okay, I mean, it sounds like, yeah, we got a few people that would like to comment. You have to come up to the microphone and state your name for the record, please.
So my name is Greg Pettit, and I mainly came here because I'm interested in the oil train issues, and I see that's outside the scope of this. But one thing I thought I had when I was listening to that conversation is the city of St. Helens has a Rainy collector as its water supply, and Portland has extensive oil tanks and other chemical tanks that are in the North Portland area that are built on unstable fill. If we were to have a catastrophic earthquake, a lot of that chemical would be released into the Willamette River, and it would come through Multnomah Channel, and it could potentially impact the water supply for the city of St. Helens. So I was wondering if that is something that is being taken into consideration.
It would fall, if it was for a natural disaster, it would
Yes.
fall underneath that. Yes, absolutely would.
And we do.
Yep.
But 90% of our fuel is in that spot. Emergency management does address that, and 90% of Oregon's fuel is in that tank farm.
Right.
Yep.
And the earthquake, that's pretty much all that land that is underneath it will liquefy, and we'll lose all those tanks. And the only way to fix it is spend billions of dollars to get Oregon to move all those tanks.
Well, I wasn't thinking of that necessarily so much as planning for an alternative water supply for folks if you were to lose your water supply for a period of time.
Your best bet is to plan for yourself, where to store your own water purifier straws. Where your best bet on any of this is to take care of yourself as much as you can, honestly. Because
I had a question, just a follow-up question to your statement. Other communities, the cities and the counties, have kind of like had like little mini water bottles and done like little information to their citizens, like at the fair, at the carnival. They're like, this is us getting the word out about preparedness. Is that something that there is grant funding for people to do that? Is that something that's part of this plan or could be part of this plan?
Well, there's not grant funded to actually give people so they can just give them all those products.
Oh, no.
But
it was
the
like
fairs-
Give them a little sample and said, and here's the list to go buy.
And we actually do that now. We like the different emergency fairs, like Prepare Fair and Columbia City, and other Prepare Fairs that we've done, and other different events. We actually talk about that, and we hand these out as prizes. So yeah, that's definitely already being done.
Super.
Just so everybody knows, we do have a mobile water purification system.
Yes, good
Make-
point. Yes, we have.
You're not going to maybe take a shower, but
We
you
have
just be able to
two
fill
of them.
buckets and
We have
drink
two
water and things.
two mobile water purifier systems, and we're purchasing another. Good
And
point.
to clarify Greg's point, we're looking at high elevation reservoirs so that those would supply the city enough water to get by in somewhat of an emergency. But that's a long range plan. We've started to plan for it and budget for it, and so that's in the works.
And a recap of what this meeting is about, is St. Helens Hazardous Mitigation Plan. It's about natural disasters and the like, reflecting on identifying the areas so that they're covered for FEMA dollars. The county and our city planner, our city building official have been working diligently together on this and identifying the areas.
4 minutes.
So, and we got a few more minutes before we go into the other. Come on up.
Jerry Melcher. I live in the Dalton Lake area down there, by Doug there. And one of the things I've talked to Doug about in the past is the city maybe having a ordinance on removal of ivy. In the last 2 years, there's been over 10 trees that have fallen in our area. And the forest that's there is eventually going to pretty much die off if the ivy isn't removed from the trees. And it also, the trees are going to die, prevents fire. The other thing too that might be helpful, and I don't know how this would work out, but there's also a trail that goes through there, and I know the fire department years ago talked about having a gate there, so that if there was a fire in there, there would be 2 ways of getting into and out of that area. So that might be something that the city might want to look into.
Thanks, Jerry.
My name's Ann Morton, and I want to know if there's a way that that forest and that trail, there have been people camping in there and lighting fires, and if they would, that forest would go on fire, we'd all be toast, I was thinking too, for the people that live on the cliff and around Dalton Lake, if there would be a flyer that we could send out to them of suggestions of what they might do. Anyway, but I don't think you can keep people out of there, but maybe you could have an ordinance of what time they have to be out, so they don't camp there and light a fire to cook and that sort of thing. Thanks.
Do we own the botanical gardens? I'm just curious.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Shauna, come on up.
Shauna Harrison, St. Helens. I was curious, you were talking about liquefaction zones. I'm sorry, I'm not going to. Yeah. So what areas in St. Helens have been identified as those?
Off the top of my head, I don't think we do, but I'm not gonna say for sure.
So
Until I actually talk to the geological experts, which they're actually doing a study on right now, and we're gonna have the results of that in September. So the Dagami group is actually doing a study on all that right now. In September, we'll actually get at the results of everything that they found. So at this point, I don't know everything, but we will shortly.
So on the 47-page audit that you guys had prepared, there were items listed in there that there was unknown value given to. I was just wondering if by the time the report is finalized, do all of the properties have to be given a value, or do you guys still could go off of an assessment of unknown?
Personally, I would go on the last assessment that was done. If you don't know the current one, I would go by the last one and maybe add 10%. This is all just, you're just trying to get as close as possible at this point. But when FEMA comes and pays for whatever they got to do, they're not going to pay it by the penny, but they will make a good evaluation as far as what needs to be paid back or more.
My question was in regards to the 47-page report that was available on the city website, and there were several areas that were listed, churches, parks. You know, for example, Sand Lake is given a value of, or excuse me, not Sand Lake, Sand Island was given a value over $1 million, and other places were given a value of unknown. So I was just wondering, I didn't know if that was the final document that was going to get filed for reference with FEMA, or if you guys have to give every one of those, you know, every one of those properties a value.
Yeah, it won't be signed yet, so changes still can be made.
And then in regards to the Dalton Lake area, you guys also, they're building right down below there off of Madrona Court. So I'm just curious if there's this fire hazard concern that everybody has down there. Is that going to allow for more access through the Crestwood Mobile Home Park? So I don't know that you're going to have an answer for that, but Mr. Jacobs.
There is already an emergency access easement through that park, if I remember correctly.
Okay. So is there anything extra you guys can do if something's in a fire hazard area as a planner? Is that like a layer of extra protection you could give those people down there? If it's been, Mr. Morton's the one that brought it up earlier in regard, you were gone, I'm sorry, but in regards to the fire, there was a concern about fire in the Dalton Lake area. I don't know.
You could create an overlay zone to create another layer of regulation in an attempt to minimize the urban wildland fire interface. Several years ago, though, it depends. Do you want to take a stick approach or a carrot approach? Several years ago, the Department of Forestry had a grant program to it offered people money to make their properties fire-wise. Okay. And that was a couple years, and I still have that stuff, but they did it for 2 years, and that was pre-John Walsh. It was a long time ago. It was before John was here. But I remember it, and I remember what we did is because the Department of Forestry reached out to us, and we sent some letters just to help facilitate communication. I don't know if they still have that kind of grant program, and I don't know if anybody said the Wildland Urban Interface. WUI is the acronym, but they talk about that quite a bit.
Department of Forestry is still actively working with communities to be fire-wise.
Okay, beautiful.
So if we contacted them, they could actually start that up again.
So that's the carrot. I don't know if we want to start hammering people with regulations or not. Certainly there's a safety issue, and that's why we have these things. But the one thing I do recall in talking to the Department of Forestry is a lot of people didn't want to do it because they like certain shrubbery and they didn't want to affect it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thanks for answering my questions.
Okay. All right. Seeing no other comments, we're going to close this public forum. We've got to give Kathy just a minute to reboot, and we're going to go right into our Kershaw. You want to come on up?